what happens is initially the right brain is in demand. So when a child is born, okay, first of all, are you aware that your brain has two parts, right? Something called left brain and right brain. And like these twins here, they're separated. They're not joined. They are separated, like you can see in the picture on the right. So the important thing is they're not just separate, they think separately. For this, in fact, Roger Wolcott Sperry, he got the Nobel Prize for finding this out. And how did he find out? We'll have Sperry spied it also here very soon. But how did he find out? So what Sperry did was conducted some experiments. We'll discuss those experiments a little later. So let us see, as a child, your right brain is in demand because right brain is the creative brain. But technically, you can call it the gestalt brain. Basically, right brain can identify patterns, unlike the left brain, which goes by logic. So initially, logic has no meaning in life. It is all patterns. So when you are trying to notice the pattern of your parents' faces, and then slowly you keep on copying the patterns subconsciously or consciously, and one day you say that word ma. You don't know how hard you tried. It takes you usually 1 year to just utter the single word, or maybe 8 months, 9 months, whatever. It's almost like a life long of work just to utter that one word or one letter, one syllable. But by mastering that one singular word, you have now mastered voice. After that, within a few months, you're speaking. Right? On the other hand, another thing that you keep on attempting is somehow to get up from that reclining position in the bed that you have been falling for months and months. You want to get up and walk like everybody, and you're again observing everything. Slowly, you learn the art of balance. So these things are not a singular thing. Balance is not a one singular thing. It is almost like achieving a balance in a graphic. There are multiple knowledges that come together to form balance. So now you understand that right brain thinking is what pushes you forward in learning or becoming a fully working human being. So the next 6 years, you're using your right brain and everybody is clapping. You walk, people clap. You speak, people clap. Then you start speaking, people clap. You follow them, people clap. Right? So this is how, actually they're releasing a chemical in your brain every time they clap. So you know that this is the right answer. So anyway, by clapping on, they were telling you that this is what we wanted, or this is what is an achievement. So when you walk, that is an achievement. So everybody is clapping. So now what is happening below the layer? Just imagine. So with every clap inside your brain, you know that the right brain knows how to do things. The left brain has no place. You don't even know that it exists till that time. And then comes school. And your world comes crashing down. Because in school, it is exactly the reverse. They don't want your right brain to be there inside your head. The school, the entire 12 years is largely dictated by the left brain thinking. In fact, controversially, even Koestler said this. At that time, it was a little controversial. But anyway, so the school only tests for your left brain. So how good you can remember? Do you remember that B comes after A? Otherwise, tell me, how does it matter if B is after A? You write the alphabets in any order, it makes the same sense. But you are told that B, if you don't write B after A, I'll cut your marks. Why? Why B has to come after A? No logic, right? So anyway, so slowly you abandon your right brain and you're now totally relying on your left brain to do the thinking. So the teacher tells you, like remember this definition, you are trying to remember it by rote. And after you are able to remember that definition, and if you exactly repeat it, there is a clapping. If you do your own interpretation, which is much better and more creative, there is no clapping. In fact, the teacher puts a 0. That is the unfortunate part. So they are driving your right brain down for next 12 years. Yes, luckily in between, halfway down, another problem strikes. Some chemicals in your brain tell you that there are two kinds of genders. If you're a male, there is a female gender also. So suddenly you need acknowledgement from that angle as well. So it becomes very complicated at that stage. So the problem is, even the other gender is going through the same problems, that they also want to be acknowledged. And again, they also learn that the left brain is more acknowledgeable than the right brain. So most of the students want to belong and adhere, even if they don't agree. We'll come to that part. I'll share every research with you, which was wonderfully done long back. So most of people will adhere to wrong answers. It was proven long back. I'll show you that research as well. So even if the answer is wrong, which means I don't want to like learn by rote, but I will do it because everybody is doing it. So it must be right. So some of you may survive through all that, what I can call Holocaust or apocalypse, because that is flood. The knowledge is flooded down your brain for 12 years in a continuous stream. So even if you end up surviving it a little or more. So there are two kinds of people who survive. One is people who rebel and totally rely on their right brain and start doing highly creative things, and they fall back in studies. These are one kind. Another kind is to somehow balance the left brain while keeping a large enough space for the right brain. These are the people who have good hobbies, keep on doing extracurricular things while they study. So these are the most balanced people, and they can happen to become the best of the designers. But fine, moving ahead. So these are the brain usages I discussed. One thing is very clear. Basically, whenever your parents want you to help with the house, so without right brain, it is impossible. Both brains process parallelly. It is not about that the left brain doesn't have parallel processing, but only one, which is the right brain, can join the dots. The other is linear. Always, I'll proceed further. So what happens is,
Your screen is not shared currently.
Okay, I'll just share it back. Yes. So basically, if you have to keep the right brain alive, you have to make sacrifices. You have to sacrifice some marks at school, because marks will be cut if you don't adhere. So then your right brain is out of the game. So if you have to just win hearts by scoring, then sorry, right brain is not for you. Also, people can also develop specific fears. I'll come to this again in a presentation also. So as a result of learning, so when you learn, you have new fears, fears of rejection, failure, and so much more. So here, now we start to learn about some of the best people who have contributed a lot to thinking. One of the Russians, one of them, especially, maybe it's somebody that I have learned about much earlier, was Pavlov. Pavlov started as a physiologist and was working with dogs. Then he suddenly discovered something which took him on to psychology. Even in dogs, he saw there was a psychology, which means he saw that the dogs he was working with salivated, which means their saliva would come out upon presentation of food. Slowly he noticed saliva would come out when they noticed the person who presented food, which means they anticipated that food is coming. They start salivating. So he termed this as classical conditioning. Like people will behave and will continue to behave in that manner, even if the object of that behavior is not present. So if he has, for example, if he rings a bell while presenting food, now every time the bell will ring, the dog will salivate. Even if there's no food, there's no person. So this was one of the starting points of behaviorism. Although there's another person called John B. Watson in US, who was doing some behaviorism works. These were much more controversial. All of the works that I'm going to show you now were considered, and even today, they are considered unethical works. The experiments they did with animals and sometimes even with real kids. John B. Watson did this experiment with a real kid. He introduced this kid to fear. He put a small white mouse, kid started playing with it. But then the next time he introduced the mouse and the kid touched it, he created a loud sound and the kid got terrified. Slowly, every time he'll do this, and slowly the kid was terrified of mice. So these are some stories may look unfortunate, but this is something that we need to know how experiments develop, because this allows us to know how our brains think. In fact, some of these scientists have said there's nothing that you think you are controlling, nothing. Everything gets controlled. Then there was Skinner. Skinner is very, very famous. Again, he's worked both with kids as well as pigeons. So Skinner tried that pigeons could go press a button to release food and things like this. And he suggested for the first time that the concept of free will was just an illusion. All human action was direct result of conditioning. This was his thought. So he called it radical behaviorism. So he had read Pavlov. In fact, most of the people after Pavlov were all influenced by Pavlov's writings and researches. So here, Skinner, I'll give you an example of the kind of innovations Skinner was involved in. At that time, when Skinner was there, missiles, US wanted to make missiles, guided missiles. None of you can imagine what kind of ideas people get. But okay, missile was something new. He had his own knowledge of pigeons. So his concept was to put a pigeon on a missile. And the pigeon will locate the target because their eyesight, the bird's eyesight is very good. He will locate the target and move his beak. His work was to just move his beak, and the missile's work was to follow the beak. So you can imagine what kind of difficult experiments people did to bring knowledge to this world, right? So he worked with rodents also, which means mice, and food. So how when pressing a food pellet, like pressing a lever, they can deliver food packets and food pellets, and they can take those pellets. So how to take food on their own. And he did work with a kid, which was called a kid box by the media at that stage. But these were all developing some set of knowledges which we are using today. Harry Harlow, he worked with rhesus monkeys. He identified that he created two monkeys in the room. One was a wire monkey, just with wires, which could deliver food. You press a lever, get a food, right? And a cloth monkey. So just a face, some kind of robotic face, and some cloth on it. So he surprisingly found that social isolation was his area of expertise. He found that people felt isolated because this monkey was removed from his mother. So, and he did not know about what mothers are. But frankly, except for getting food, he never went to the wire monkey, and he was always clinging to the cloth monkey, because cloth felt like your wad also get transferred to the cloth. So he would see that they need to belong and they need to be loved, and they can derive love from anything soft. So this has heavily influenced our understanding of child development. And this also helps us understand our left brain and right brain. Then there was Solomon Eliot, Asch. So in fact, Asch has got a little complicated experiment he did. He, in a class, he would draw lines and will ask, like on the left, there is a line, and on the right, there are 3 lines. So which line A, B, or C is the same length as the line on the left? And he had placed stooges in the class. Stooges means people who are trained to do what he wants. The stooges will always give the wrong answer, and the real innocent participant, which is you, will follow that stooge and also give the wrong answer, even though they believed that the answer they know was right, but they will not give it. They'll always, like, people want to belong. So this, he basically demonstrated the power of conformity. Now you understand when I said you will do things you don't believe in, and you are doing it maybe even today, you do things you don't believe in because your brain is wired that way. Just to belong, you will do that. So in fact, all of them never started studying psychology till later in life. They studied something else, and while experimenting in that, they discovered psychology. In fact, Kafka had published Gestalt-oriented text on psychology in 1921. So Solomon read it and interested in psychology. But these experiments, the later experiments happened in 1950s. 1950s was a time, we'll come to it after this, but first, last person. So Milgram also did some experiments where in Milgram's experiments, what happened was, suppose you are there, right? So you are on the left. Imagine you are sitting on the left. So there is somebody on the right. The person on the right will get a shock whenever he gets a wrong answer. And person on the left is asked to deliver the shock, which is you. So you will have to deliver the shock. So technically, if I right now ask you, will you deliver a shock to the person on the right? You'll say no. But then actually, when they gave the wrong answer, people delivered shocks continuously. It is another thing that the person on the right was just an actor. There was no actual shock involved. He was only pretending to be shocked. But in that experiment, he wanted to learn how far people were willing to go to obey the commands of an authority. So he found that 65% of the participants were willing to deliver the maximum level of shocks, despite the fact that the learner seemed to be in serious distress or even unconscious. So now you know how much we confirm. 400-volt electrical shock was what was told that the person is getting. Well, so that is some of the bad experiments that you needed to know. Now we come to Sperry, the person I talked about earlier. So Sperry, maybe he was already aware of some of these experiments because he typically did follow Pavlov and Skinner, especially their experiments. So Sperry actually came across, Sperry was a doctor. So he came across a person whose left brain and right brain got disconnected, which means for sure they could not talk to each other. Before that, nobody was very sure. So they could not talk to each other. And I'll repeat an experiment which is written here also, so that you understand how much complicated we are. So in a split brain person, he showed 2 symbols. One is a circle, one is a square with each eye. So with one eye, he sees a circle, another eye, he sees a square, and he is asked, what did you see the person says square. Then with his left hand, he's asked to draw. What did he see? He draws a circle. Then he's asked to see what he's drawn and tell us. He says a square. This is a very complicated experiment. You must read and understand if you want. But this means our left brain and right brain function on their own. That was proven that day. They are on their own. They think differently. Right? So vision is unfortunately separated from the drawing totally. And that's what makes it difficult for most of us to even do a good drawing. And then we come to Arthur B. Koestler, the one whose experiment, just a second. Arthur B. Koestler, and unfortunately the right side is incorrect. So I'll tell you more about him because I did not put it because I had already shown you everything. So Arthur Koestler was somebody who went deep into using all this information and then writing how creativity can be induced by that introduction of comic relief or introduction of any kind of explosion when the person is already gone on a journey, knowledge learning, but is not able to get the breakthrough. So you have to bring in another frame of reference to crack the puzzle. And that is where majority of people who are scoring 100 out of 100 marks or people who have got high IQ are unable to crack any puzzle because they are not able to bring another plane of reference because they do not have enough planes of reference was what was given to them. So with that kind of, I have at least finished with this part.